It isn't immediately obvious, but each of these impressive buildings has something in common with the others. The link extends to this magnificent bridge in Tampa, Florida. And to this elegant house in London. No, they don't share the same architect. They're all finished with the same exterior protection, which has to survive everything from the burning Florida sun to the traditional British summer, the sort of damp that goes right through you. This is it. It's not a paint, it's an advanced textured coating. It's so resilient, the makers have guaranteed it'll still be doing its job and looking like this when we're celebrating the arrival of the 21st century. Now, if you're wondering what all this has to do with the sort of house most of us are ever likely to own, let's switch on some different weather, and I'll tell you a story. It begins in this quiet, peaceful suburban close. Most of the houses have been lovingly looked after, but the new owner of this property has years of neglect to make up for. Let's look at some of the damage. This is called spalling. The surface of the bricks has flaked away and left the porous material inside open to the weather. It absorbs water, which can freeze and expand, causing yet more damage. And between bricks, the pointing becomes loose and falls out, which of course lets even more moisture in. The smooth render, which forms a plinth around the base of the house, is also faulty. There are dozens of cracks. And in some places, there's a growth of algae on the surface, discoloring it and, incidentally, showing that the render is damp. Because render is not flexible, it'll crack when it's heated. The same thing happens when cold makes it contract. The tiny fractures created let in water, which gets behind the render and can freeze. This forces the render away from the wall and expands the cracks, letting in more water to add to the damage. And, worryingly, all this can happen virtually invisibly, leaving apparently sound surfaces which, in fact, are only barely attached to the brickwork underneath. Pebble dash, essentially render with pebbles applied to it, is even more vulnerable. Here it too has cracks which range from several inches to several feet in length. And the surface is uneven in a number of places where the pebble dash has been repaired with a sand and cement mix, leaving a different texture. Here, where pipes have been installed, there are unsightly repairs and gaps. And when the surface is tapped with a small hammer, the difference in sound tells us that in some places there are hollows underneath. What happens here is that the pebbles become loose and fall out, leaving sizable pits in the surface, into which, of course, water finds its way, with disastrous results when it freezes. And, of course, because the pebbles are set in the same material as render, heat and cold have the same damaging effect. Now, all this damage is, at best, an eyesore, at worst, serious enough to lead to other structural problems. And it's not unique to this building, of course. Here's a local authority property which has recently been purchased by its former tenants, and they're going to give it a facelift, which it badly needs. And because the owners of this house have installed new windows, there are repaired areas round the frames which now need to be matched in. And it's much more economic to deal with all the other faults at the same time. All the problems we've seen, and particularly the little horror story here, can be dealt with. Wallcote, the exterior coating which protects those much larger buildings, even the bridge, will transform this house and the others while dealing with all the existing problems. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? But a visit to the factory where the material is made would explain a great deal. Over 1 million litres of coating are produced here each year in a wide range of colours. The complex technology behind the product is licensed from Textured Coatings of America, who have developed the product during almost 30 years of research. The ingredients fall into 7 groups. Blended resins are used to permanently bond the coating to the surface it covers. Plasticizer keeps the mixture flexible and helps to repel dirt. Fillers make sure that minor cracks and scars are filled as the material is applied. Pigments. The white pigment is always titanium dioxide, but there are many others used in combination. They're all chosen to give a long-lasting colour stability. Fungicide prevents the growths that stain and disfigure surfaces. Aggregate. This is perlite, and it gives texture to the finish, as well as acting as an insulating barrier against the elements. Solvent. This is essential, of course, because the material would otherwise be too viscous to apply. Once applied, the solvent dries off and the coating bonds permanently to the surface. Now, as each batch is made, it's crucial that colour, texture and consistency are checked against standard references and other samples from the same batch run. This device simulates daylight. Here, the viscosity, the thickness of the material, is being checked. And this allows the texture to be compared with existing samples which the current batch must match. Wallcote has 2 properties which are very important for the job it has to do. Buildings move and breathe, so must any protective covering which is going to stay in place and look good for a long time. Here in the laboratory, we can demonstrate what that means. That's a piece of flexible plastic which bends more than any building would do, but let's see what happens if you coat an identical piece of plastic with the product. It's been painted on there, allowed to dry. What happens when I bend it? That is what happens. Nothing at all. No sign of any cracking or flaking. Remains absolutely intact. Now, what about this notion of the coating being able to breathe and yet remain waterproof at the same time? Well, this is quite a nice demonstration. It's a glass tank with a plastic tube connected to it. In the bottom half of the tank is just air. We've got a pump here. I'm going to pump some air through there in a moment. At the moment, that's just air at atmospheric pressure. Halfway up the tank has been sealed a building block. It's been sealed all around the edges, and the building block has been coated with the product. And as you can see, the top half of the tank has got water in it. It's been standing there for several hours, but if you look carefully, you'll see that there's water in the top. There isn't a trace of moisture in the bottom. That's a clear indication that no water has passed through the building block into the cavity below. Now let's see what happens when we turn the pump on. It takes a few seconds to build up pressure, but this, I promise you, will astonish you, because after just 5 or 6 seconds, you'll start to see air coming up through the product. There it goes now. Fantastic, isn't it? Now that indicates, I think, absolutely clearly that although the material will keep the water out, it still allows the building material to breathe. Now, what about atmospheric pollution? We've all heard about acid rain. Well, I've got another rather graphic demonstration here for you which demands that I wear some kind of protection, because we're going to go for some stuff which is a great deal more polluting than any acid rain. This, in this bottle, is concentrated hydrochloric acid. And we've got a sheet of galvanized steel which is partly exposed, just the zinc showing, and partly coated with the product. Now watch what happens when I give a few drops of this, as I said, concentrated hydrochloric acid. What happens when I drop a few drops onto the material? There on the galvanized steel, there on the coating. Let's get a little bit more on there, you can see. There it is, bubbling away and giving off very unpleasant fumes, which I don't really want to breathe in too much. But there is the textured coating, unaffected. The coating is independently tested against the criteria laid down by the British Standards Authority, and the results would allow the company to offer a 30-year guarantee. They restrict it to 15 to give a margin of safety. But for the guarantee to stand up, it's not just the manufacturing which is important, it's how the product is applied. The preparation is meticulous. The first job is to protect paths and gardens by laying down dust sheets. Once that's done, doors and windows and all other areas not being treated are carefully masked with paper and tape. You can see that nothing is left to chance. Even the guttering has been masked off and protected. The next stage is the most critical. All the faults which were noted on the original survey have to be found and corrected. Firstly, render and pebble dash are hammer tested to locate hollow areas. These are completely removed, cut back to sound surfaces. Small cracks in otherwise sound areas are cut out and filled with epoxy resin. Large cracks are treated with special bonding primers and filled with a sand and cement mixture. This is then finished to match the surrounding surfaces. Previously rendered areas which have been cut back are once again treated with the bonding primer and restored with 2 layers of a sand-cement mixture. Pebble dash finishes are matched by spraying similar-sized grit into the still wet surface with what's called a Tyrolean gun. Once the repair work has been carried out, cleaning down can begin. This involves wire brushing the grime and pollution, moss and algae from all surfaces. Scraping and wire brushing flaking paint from areas to be coated. Where brickwork is damaged, surfaces are recreated using a sand, cement and adhesive mix. Damaged pointing is raked out and replaced. Now this is the mixture of sand, cement and adhesive used to resurface bricks. It's thinned down to make it easier to apply by brush. All the prepared and restored brickwork is coated with it in a process called bagging. That covers small cracks and eliminates further spalling. And the brick line remains as a feature. The same process is used on the textured surfaces. The next stage is to make all surfaces waterproof. On the prepared brickwork, render and pebble dash, a slush coat is applied. This is made from a silicon-based waterproofing mixed with the final coating in the appropriate color. It's applied with a brush to make sure it's worked into all the nooks and crannies. And it really does keep the water out. This is one of the areas which was waterproofed and is now dried. If I take this watering can and give it a good soaking, the beads of water just run off. It's quite obvious that nothing is penetrating. Well, there it is. The preparation is done. The house is ready for the application of the finishing material in the chosen colors. Because Wallcote is both viscous and textured, a high-powered compressor is needed as the heart of the equipment. This drives a very sophisticated pump which can regulate both the volume of air and the amount of coating being applied, which can be up to 20 times the thickness of a typical paint film. The operator then has complete control with his spray gun over the amount of material being applied to the surface. This is important because he needs to take into account different types of surface and factors such as high winds. Well, the job's finished. The last of the masking has been removed. Let's use the magic of television to remind ourselves of the state this was in before. You can see the change is pretty radical, but this is just one example of what can be done. The pride the craftsmen take in their work can be seen at head office. This is where applicators pin the customer satisfaction forms, which relate to their individual jobs. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The company has thousands of similar comments on file, and they're all available for viewing. They're from a wide variety of people, with properties ranging from small terraces to grand mansions. And in a world where not all contractors live up to guarantees, what's behind the Wallcote guarantee? The product is manufactured by the company and no subcontractors are used to apply it. All the craftsmen are trained by the company and work exclusively for it. The workmanship itself is guaranteed for 15 years. So it's no surprise that Wallcote has grown into the largest textured coating company in the UK. Their motto is simple: Wallcote, for homes to be proud of.